Hello everyone, my name is Carrow. I'm an urban fantasy author and I also write romance under the name of Faye Black, and I am here today to talk to you about some resource books that you can add to your arsenal to help you with your writing. I wanted to do this video now because in a couple months we're going to have National Novel Writing Month, and then before that is Preptober. And some of the books that I'm going to recommend are a little lengthy and would require reading, so I don't really want to suggest it in Preptober when you're kind of hashing out things to do with your work, and would like to kind of give you that buffer space of things to add, to read, to digest, and then figure out how to implement it when you're going through your planning process in October. Now, these books I'm going to recommend aren't your typical Save the Cat and all of that, because I think that those books have been recommended, digested, reviewed, discussed in great detail, and I don't really need to kind of touch base on that. But I am going to express a couple of other works that I use on the regular. Either I have them on the shelf behind me, or I frequently go to them on my Kindle, and I have lots of different things highlighted, because I found these things to be exceptionally useful. I hope that you will as well. Now, the first book that I actually want to recommend is Romancing the Beat. Right over here. And the reason I want to recommend this book is because if you're writing romance or you're writing a book with a romance subplot, I find this book to be very, very useful in lots of ways, because it breaks down all the different beats that happen within a romance, from the meet cute to, the protecting self from love to going back, getting together, and all that goodness. It really dives into that very well, and it's a very short book, it's a very easy read, and it's like straight to the point. If you couple that book with Seven Figure Fiction by T. Taylor, then you've got like a really winning combo if it's romance that you're looking to produce. Another book that I would like to recommend is going to be Emotional Beat, which actually talks about the different ways to represent emotional responses in fiction. We hear very often the show don't tell, and I know sometimes individuals struggle with trying to figure out how to show a particular emotion, so that book has actually been really useful for me trying to brainstorm different ways to describe things. I often in my writing go with like the narrowed eyes when somebody is kind of irritated or suspicious, but there's lots of different ways to do that, and if you would like to move away from echo phrases or echo words or anything like that, that book is a pretty good diverse little grouping of descriptions that you could use, and I use that pretty regularly if I feel like I'm using the same thing. My go-to expression gesture is usually shrugs. That's my all the time. So usually if I'm trying to move away from that, I identify whatever the emotional response that the person is and go find a different way to explain that. And you don't always have to use those descriptions. You can also kind of get an idea of what to do and then describe it in your own way. So another book that I want to recommend is going to be called Body Beats, which is a way to describe what somebody is physically doing. Earlier I talked about how my crutch phrase is shrugs, right? And there's lots of different ways to talk about like how somebody's having a response or a gesture or anything else like that without using the same default all the time. So with that book, it kind of, describes, again, much like Emotional Beat, it describes the physical reactions that somebody has, but it kind of moves into different ways of describing running, jogging, crying, like all that. And again, I find that to be really useful because when I'm writing, I stick with my crutch phrases, and then when I edit, I go back and use that book. But I have noticed that since I became more well-versed with that particular resource, that when I'm actually writing, I'm kind of like am subconsciously trying to switch out those descriptions. So again, one of those things that I would recommend that you read now, so that way when you start drafting in November, it helps you out just a little bit more. Now, if you're going to write a book that has a lot of action or fighting in it, I would recommend that you get Violence, a Writer's Guide, again, right here, because that also talks a lot about like the actions that go into causing harm on others, descriptions of that, what happens when you do like stab somebody in a certain way. I can't remember what it was I was reading a couple weeks ago, but somebody had sent me a piece to review, and somebody had literally gotten a neck wound, and then that person kept going on like nothing had happened. And I'm not a doctor or anything, but there's a major artery right here, and if you kind of cut right there, usually people die very quickly. So it kind of helps you understand the severity of injuries and how they're going to hold you back. And again, this is a book that I do use with some regularity under Carrow Brown, not Faye Black, because there is a lot of action and a lot of fighting that goes on in that. Since I discussed that there is, the body trauma that happens, there is body trauma for writers. And I would really recommend this if you are thinking about doing something with action, but you're not very familiar with fighting itself or the impact of being struck or what happens when you exert yourself too hard. One of the first things that a lot of people are going to call out when they read your work, and if you're not depicting it properly, are going to be things like that. Like, I used the neck injury as an example. There was another piece of writing that I reviewed for somebody, and they had somebody basically ducking down, turning, and watching a fist flying over them, and I asked them if they had a spine, because in order to do what they described, the back does not work that way. So, but I'm leaning more towards, like, you know, the repercussions of fighting, because nobody really wants to see somebody get into a fight, get beat up, and then be fine the next day, unless you're playing D&D and you have a full rest. So those two books together are going to be really helpful if that's something that you're looking at doing. I'm going to discuss a couple of books that are actually out of print right now, and I'm not sure how you can get a hold of them without paying a lot of money, but I have also found them to be really good resources. So this series of books is from Whodunit, and as far as I know, these are out of print, but if you can find them, go for it. But definitely things that I have found very useful. I grabbed them off the shelf just for you guys. The first one is Forensics. So if you're doing something that involves like detective or research or any of that goodness, this is a really good book. It gives great details about, you know, chemicals and what happens when they are actually going through the forensics process. And I found it like, outside of going and interviewing somebody who works in this field, this is like the next best thing that I absolutely love. After that, we have the police procedure and investigation book right here. And again, I don't know anything too much about this other than what I read in this book and a couple of things that I have seen on YouTube, but a very good resource that I like to have that will help me go through the process and understand it. Even though it may not be like in the forefront of my story, I like to have it and have it as a resource, and if I have to go and look something up, at least this will help me figure out what direction I need to go. This next book I'm pretty sure got me on a list somewhere, but it's called The Book of Poisons, and it's about the effects of poisons, what they do, what it looks like, what it sounds like, what it makes you feel like when you ingest these. And it has everything from professional poisons to homemade poisons, which is probably why I'm on the list, because I didn't get one, I got two of these, and I sent one to Tamara Woods, who is a cozy mystery author, so I thought she would also benefit from that. But you can find those books. I'm pretty sure there's a couple that you can buy still on Amazon or maybe from eBay if you are looking at doing that. And again, these three books right here, absolutely useful if you're writing some kind of detective story or research. Now, the very last book that I would recommend that you have in your arsenal to read, digest, and kind of process as you start getting ready for NaNoWriMo is going to be Creating Character Arcs. I have talked about this book in a lot of detail on this channel, and that's kind of why I have this book last. But if you are somebody who is looking at fleshing out your characters or giving them something more than what they are, this is a really good book for that. Kim does such a great job of explaining the 3 different arcs that can happen in a story, what it looks like, and she's got different examples that we have either seen or read about that we can pull from. So this would be more for plot and character development that I would recommend, versus everything else, which has been more like writing craft. Technically, these are all writing craft, so they're all writing craft, never mind. But those are all the books that I have found to be very useful for a lot of the writing that I am doing, especially within like the last 12 months. Those are my go-to references. They're behind me, they're on a Kindle, they're highlighted, they've got dog ears. I've been using them. And there are a couple other videos that I could recommend that I've done here on my channel if you're looking at different resources, you know, such as for dialogue, making conflict, all of that. Those are there on the channel, and I'll link a couple down below if you would like to take a look at those. But for the purposes of this video, I wanted to stick to things that I found to be useful that haven't been talked about into complete saturation. And I should probably throw out the thing that nobody's sponsoring me. I wasn't gifted these books. I bought them with my own money, so like there's no bias here. I literally have found them to be useful and decided to own them. So with that said, these books are obviously useful for me and for what I write. Everybody has a different genre. Some people do kidlit, some people do cozy mysteries, and if you are one of those folks, please feel free to list down the books that you have found to be useful, because if somebody comes here and they're looking for another resource and I'm not providing it for their particular genre, maybe you will. So just the name of the book and the author, and we can Google foo it after that. But that is going to bring me to the end of the video. Thank you guys so much for coming in here and what I have to say about these resources. I hope that you find them to be useful, and I will talk to y'all again real soon. Bye!